going to talk about the Doctrine of Precedent. Jixian, do you know what is Doctrine of Precedent and what is your understanding about stare decisis?
Okay, before I start, let me just explain what a precedent really is. A precedent is the reason for deciding whether to establish principles or the rule of law. When deciding similar cases in the future, the lower courts of the same court hierarchy must follow the principle or rule of law. The doctrine of principle is based on the principle like cases should be treated alike. With the doctrine of principle, our law is provided with certainty and consistency as well as justice and fairness. Basically, the stare decisis came from a Latin phrase which has a meaning of let the decision stand. This is brought up to an idea that when the decision is made in a particular case, it will stand as a good law that other cases should rely upon on that decision as an accurate statement of law.
I see. So besides Doctrine of Precedent, there is ratio decidendi. Do you know what is it talking about?
The ratio decidendi is the reason of why the judge made that decision for the particular case. It can be said that the ratio decidendi is to sum up or conclude the relevant legal rule to the material facts.
Have you heard about what obiter dicta is?
Obiter dicta is the comment that is made in the past. It is not necessary in deciding the issue before the court. In many instances, such statements arise as the judges speaks of hypothetical situations that do not appear in the case. So, Kyan, have you heard about the case of Coral Reef Limited and Cirebon Enterprises Limited and other?
Yes, I had heard about it before. Is the case talking about the Doctrine of Precedent?
Yeah.
So the case is where the claimant refused to volunteer information about its assets, which the defendants request for security for cause. Then the claimant attempted to rely on the decision of the High Court in Sap Oil, where its refusal to volunteer information about its assets was made before the Court of Appeal decision. Therefore, they expect any master hears the application by the defendant to be bound by precedent. So next, my group members are going to talk about the types of precedent, the hierarchy of court, when and do judges make law, ways to depart from judicial precedent, advantages and disadvantages of precedent.
Now I'm going to talk about the hierarchy of courts. There are two categories of the cases, which are civil and criminal cases. The example of courts are Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, High Court, Crown Court, and Magistrate Court. First of all is the County Court. Decisions of the County Court are bound and may be appealed to the appropriate division of the High Court. The County Court will deal with most matters under the value of £5,000, such as claims for repayment of debts, breach of contract involving goods or property, personal injury, housing issues that include recovery of mortgage and rent arrears, and repossession, and many others. The cases are heard by a judge without a jury. Next, the High Court has covered three divisions, which are the Chancery Division, Family Division, and the Queen's Bench Division. Divisions of the High Court are bound and may be appealed to the Court of Appeal. The Divisional Court of the Chancery Division deals with cases concerning equity, contract, torts, trust, contentious probate, tax partnerships, bankruptcy and land and others. The Divisional Court of the Family Division deals with all matrimonial matters, including custody of children, parentage, adoption, family homes, domestic violence, separation, annulment, divorce and medical treatment declarations, and with contested probate matters and others. Queen's Bench Division hears judicial reviews, statutory appeals, shipping and maritime disputes, national and international business disputes, including international trade, banking, commodities, arbitration disputes, and others. For the Magistrate Court, decisions of the Magistrate Court are bound and may be appealed to the Crown Court. It deals with summary offences, and for now, what are the summary offences? The examples are minor traffic offences, minor theft, assaults and also obstructing the police in their performance of duty. Cases are normally heard by either a panel of 3 magistrates or by a district judge without a jury. Whereas in Crown Court, decisions of the Crown Court are bound and may be appealed to the Criminal Division of the Court of Appeal. The Crown Court deals with indictable criminal cases that have been transferred from the Magistrates Court. Now, what are the indictable criminal offences? For example, murder, rape, kidnapping, and manslaughter. These are the cases are heard by a judge and a jury. For Court of Appeal, decisions of the Court of Appeal are bound and may be appealed to the previous decisions of Supreme Court, but there are still some exceptions. The Court of Appeal consists of 2 divisions, the Criminal Divisions and the Civil Divisions. The Criminal Divisions hears appeals from the Crown Court and its decisions are bound by Supreme Court. There are 3 courts under the Criminal Divisions, which are the Divisional Court of Queen Bench Division, Crown Court, and the Magistrates Court. The Divisional Court of Queen Bench Division deals with criminal review cases. For the Civil Division, it hears the appeals concerning civil law and family justice from the High Court, tribunals, and certain cases from the County Court. While its own previous decision is also bound unless there's a misunderstanding or misapplication of law. In the case of R against Simpson, the case was interpreted as simply as referred that if an earlier case was made in ignorance of a relevant law, then it will not be binding. Last but not least, for Supreme Court in 2009, the Supreme Court replaced the House of Lords in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland as the highest court. While in Scotland, the highest court is the High Court of Justiciary. The Supreme Court hears appeals from the Court of Appeal and also from the High Court, but only in exceptional circumstances. Appeals are normally heard by 5 Supreme Court justices, which are the formerly Lords of Appeal in ordinary or law lords, but there can be as many as 5. Supreme Court decisions are binding on all courts below it. The Supreme Court regarded itself as bound by its previous decisions up until 1966. In the practice statement, the right for the Supreme Court to be freely depart from its previous decisions appeared. In the case of Hall against Simons 2000 and Rondell against Worsley 1969, the House of Lords refused to follow Rondell's case in the case of Halls, which is the barristers were given immunity against claims for negligence in their presentation of cases. So, the lower courts do bound to the higher courts unless there's exceptions in the particular case.
There are 3 types of precedent: original precedent, binding precedent, and persuasive precedent. When the court hears a case that involves a law or a set of facts that have never come before the court, this outcome is known as original precedent. This outcome will be followed by other judges in the future. Since there are no past cases to base a decision on, the judges will look into previous cases that are similar and may decide to use the similar rules that was applied to the current case. This is known as reasoning by analogy in order to help guide them reach a decision. For example, in the case of Regina against Regina, this case is about a husband intending to have a sexual intercourse with his wife and was then charged with rape. The husband argued that the contract of marriage gave an irrevocable consent for a sexual intercourse. The House of Lords then held that there was no longer a rule of law that the wife is believed to have consented irrevocably to sexual intercourse with her husband, and the husband could be convicted of rape or attempt to rape his wife when she does not give the consent. A binding precedent arises from previous cases and binds judges in the future because they must follow the precedent. It is only applied when the facts or the original case are sufficiently similar to the new case. that previous case decision must be made by the court that is of higher rank than the current court that is currently deciding upon the issue. Only the ratio decidendi from a higher court can create a binding precedent. For example, in the case of a grant against Australian Knitting Mills Limited was closely related to the Donahue and Stevenson case. In Donahue and Stevenson, the concern of this case was that Mrs. Donahue did not have any contract with the manufacturer, so it was likely that she could not sue them. However, the court held that it does not need to have a contractual relationship for a duty to be established, and that manufacturers thus owe a duty to consumers who intend to use their product. In the Grant case, Dr. Grant bought an undergarment which was in a defective condition, causing him to have an irritant skin condition. The court held that the Australian Knitting Mills owe a duty to Dr. Grant, although there is no privity between Dr. Grant and the manufacturer. This is because the company should have known that the absence of a reasonable care in the preparation for the garments would result in an injury to the purchaser's health. This decision is bound to the Donahue and Stevenson case since there are similar cases. A persuasive precedent are previous decisions made which is not binding, but it may influence a judge's decision if the legal principles and reasoning given for the previous case is relevant to the current case. Persuasive precedent can come from different places. For example, it can come from courts in lower hierarchy. The higher courts may follow decisions of the lower court in deciding a case before them. For example, in Regina against Regina, the House of Lords agreed that the Court of Appeal's decision with the Court of Appeal's decision and followed the same reasoning in deciding that a man cannot rape his wife. Persuasive precedent can also come from statements made obiter dictum, which is the comments made in passing. It is not necessary to decide the issue before the court. In many instances, such statements arises as the judge speaks of hypothetical situations which do not arise in the case in question. For example, in Regina against Grotz, the defendant was charged with attempted murder and pleaded the defense of duress. The court followed the obiter dicta of the case of Regina against Howe, saying that duress is no defense to murder, and the obiter dicta of Howe became the ratio decidendi in the Grotz case. Persuasive precedent can also come from dissenting judgment. In certain cases, there is more than one judge presiding in a matter, and there will be more than one judgment. The decision is always based on a majority decision. If there are 3 judges and 2 of them are in favor and 1 of them have a different opinion, then the one judge will have to provide the reasons for his dissenting judgment. If a similar case comes before the court, the dissenting judgment could be cited in the case to see if it could be the correct decision. For example, in Candelier against Crane, Christmas & Co., Lord Denning dissented, saying that the accountants who negligently prepared a company report could be held liable if they knew that their report will be referred to by potential investors. This dissenting judgment was followed closely in the case of Hadley Bryan against Heller. The UK courts can also consider decisions of the courts in other jurisdictions. For example, decisions in the court in Scotland, Ireland, Commonwealth countries such as Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States. These are usually cited where there is a shortage or total lack of English authority on a point. Moving on, my friend Kyan will discuss about when and do judges make law.
The question arises is, do judges make law? According to the declaratory theory stated by William Blackstone, judges do not make law as it is the function of the legislature to make law and merely the function of the court to apply that law. Hence, the parliament's sovereignty is preserved. Historically, a great deal for our law is case law which are made by judicial decisions. For example, contract or tort law are largely judge-made. Secondly, judges are left to define their own role. They are given the power to review decisions of any public body, even when Parliament had said that they are not allowed to do so. Their guidance suggested that judges should take a cautious approach to change the law. This is because some commentators feel that judiciary's current approach is tending to go too far and straying outside its constitutional place. Judges should only change the law if Parliament intended to do so and the failure of doing it would be a breach of faith. There has been a debate about whether judges can and should make the law. Judges can only make law when they are deciding on a new issue brought before them. Donaghy and Stevenson is the first novel case that was brought to court and created common law of negligence. In American International Assurance Co. Limited and Coyen B., Abdul Hamid Mohammed JCA considered that the peculiar facts surrounding Saad Marvi required the court to strike down the contract in the interest of justice. Courts have traditionally acted to preserve the image that they merely apply and enforce laws the legislature passes subject to the rules relating to judicial review of legislation. It is certainly taboo to suggest that judges make law and such statements are frowned upon in common law jurisdictions, even though judges in reality play an extensive role in the creation and development of common law. Next, the judges make law is to adapt to social change. A case where judges willing to change the law is Fitzpatrick and Stirling Housing Association Limited. Mr. Fitzpatrick, who is a homosexual man, had lived with his partner, Mr. Thompson, for 18 years. However, Mr. Fitzpatrick tends to take over the tenancy under Rent Act after Mr. Thompson died in 1994, but the landlord refused. Rent Act 1977 states that when a statutory tenant dies, the tenancy can be taken over by a spouse, a person living with the ex-tenant as a wife or husband, or a member of the family who was living with the tenant. The case is thought to establish that he was the member of Mr. Thompson's family by virtue of their close and loving relationship. As a result, Court of Appeal concluded that it would be wrong to change the law by interpreting the word family to include same-sex couple. The House of Lords overturned the Court of Appeal's decision. It ruled that the appellant could not be treated as the spouse of the deceased tenant, but as a matter of law, a same-sex partner could establish the necessary family link for the purposes of the legislation. Next, the other reason for judges make law is consensus lawmaking. Lord Devlin has distinguished between activist lawmaking and dynamic lawmaking. In Gilead and West Norfolk and Wisbech Area Health Authority, the House of Lords was asked to consider whether a girl under the age of 16 needed her parents' consent before she could be given contraceptive services. The House of Lords held, by a majority of 3 to 2, that a girl under 16 did not need parental consent if she was mature enough to make up her own mind. But the decision did not end the controversy, and it was rightly suggested that the judges were not the right people to make the choice. However, since Parliament had given no lead, then they had no option but to make a decision one way or the other, and were therefore forced to indulge in what Devlin would call dynamic lawmaking. Next, my friend Kelly will be talking about what can a judge can do in a case and methods to depart from precedent.
As we all know, decisions of House of Lords are binding on each lower court. However, the law still needs to be developed and cater for the changed circumstances. Therefore, there are certain judicial tools available for judges to depart from the decision in the legal system, which are by distinguishing, overruling, reversing, disapproving, and choose to follow the decision in the previous case. So, first of all, what is distinguishing? Distinguishing occurs when the judges held that the facts of the case are not similar to the facts of an earlier case. For example, in Balfour and Balfour, it is held that a wife could not claim against her husband for breach of contract, as there was no ITCRR between them. However, in Married and Married, the wife can claim for it, as the court distinguished the Balfour case and stated that because they had already separated, and hence they have the intention to be legally bound by the agreement. It is important to note that there is a new and distinct precedent which is now exist alongside with the Balfour case. Then, now let's talk about overruling. When a judge believes that the racial accident died in a previous case is no longer a good law and therefore choose to not follow it, it is considered as overruling a precedent. The Superior Court can overrule the previous decision that established by a lower court. For instance, in Pepper and Hyde, the House of Lords departed from Davis and Johnson case and took a purposive approach to interpret that hindsight may be referred to, and the teacher was not required to pay tax on the perk he received. Previously, in Davis and Johnson, the court were totally not allowed to refer to hindsight. Next, one of the methods that can be used by the judges to depart from the previous decision is by reversing. Reversing will occur when a higher court overturns the decision of a lower court on appeal in the same case. The original decision is reversed and a new precedent is created by the superior court to apply to these material facts in future cases. For example, in the case of Fitzpatrick and Sterling House Association, the House of Lords held that the homosexual partner of the deceased tenant could take over the tenancy on the principle that the same-sex partner could prove the familiar link as required by the legislation. However, if the facts of the case are significantly similar to an existing precedent, then the judge should always follow the decision that decided in the previous case. In addition, disapproving is a mechanism which facilitates a departure from previous precedent in a future case, but it is not a method of avoiding precedent. For instance, in the case of Enns and Merton London Borough Council, the House of Lords held that the purchaser of defective buildings could recover compensation when the defects were due to negligent inspection by the local authority during the construction. However, later in the Murphy and Brentwood District Council, the courts overruled the previous decision and held that the original decision was heavily disapproved. Next, when it comes to the Court of Appeal position, the general rule is that Court of Appeal is bound by the decision of House of Lords and is self-binding subject to three exceptions laid down in the case of Young and Bristol Gallup. First, when a decision of Court of Appeal conflicts with decision of House of Lords, the House of Lords decision will prevail. Secondly, if two decisions of Court of Appeal conflict, either one can be chosen to follow. Thirdly, when a decision is made per incursion, the Court of Appeal may depart from it. On the other hand, with regards to House of Lords, their decisions are binding on all inferior courts and also self-binding until 1966. The practice statement was created in 1966 by the Lord Gardiner and state that House of Lords can depart from the previous decision when it appears the right to do so. The House of Lords may depart from a previous decision if it is out of date, wrong, or creates uncertainty in the law. First, the practice statement 1966 was the first used in the case of Conway and Rimmer. This only involved a technical point of discovery document. Then, for criminal law, the first use of practice statement 1966 is in the case of Regina against Shipbury, which was overruled by the case of Anadon against Ryan. The House of Lords recognized that sometimes they might make errors, and the most important thing was to make law to its right position. Next, my friend Kimberly is going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the doctrine and precedent.
Now I'm going to talk about the advantages of case law. There are 4 advantages that I'm going to talk about today. The first one will be certainty. Judicial precedent means the litigants can assume cases like treated alike rather than the judges making their own random decision which nobody could predict. This really helps people to plan their affairs. Second advantages will be details in practical rules. Case law is a response to real situations, as opposed to the statute, which may be more heavily based on theory and logic. Case law shows the details of application of law to various circumstances, thus it gives us more information than the statute. The third advantages will be the free market in legal ideas. The right-wing philosopher Hayek has argued that there should be as little legislation as possible, with case law becoming the main source of law. He sees case law as developing in line with the market force. If the ratio of a case seems not to work, it will be abandoned. If it is working, it will be followed. In this way, the law developed in response to demand. Hayek sees the statute law as imposed by the social planners as well, forcing their views on society whether the majority of people like it or not, and threatening the liberty of the individual. The last advantages that I'm going to talk about will be flexibility. Law needs to be flexible to meet the needs of the changing society, and case law can make changes far more quickly than the parliament. The most obvious sign of this are the radical changes of the House of Law made in the field of criminal law. Following announcing in 1966 that the judges would no longer be bound by their own decision. Next, I'm going to talk about the disadvantages of case law. There are 6 disadvantages of case law that I'm going to talk about today. The first one will be complexity and volume. There are hundreds of thousands of decided cases comprising several thousand volumes of law reports, and more are added all the time. With the development of the internet, almost every decided cases is now available online or in the legal databases. Judgments themselves are very long, with many judges making no attempt at the readability, and the ratio decidendi of the cases may be varied by the irrelevant material. This can make it very difficult to pinpoint the appropriate principle. The next disadvantages will be rigid. The rules of the judicial precedents means that the judges should follow a binding precedent even if they think that is a bad decision or inappropriate. This means that this decision will come all the way like this until a high court is powerful enough to overrule them. Another point will be illogical distinction. The fact that the binding precedent must be followed unless the facts of the cases are significantly different that can lead to the judges making distinction between the facts of a period case or the cases before them. This in turn leads to a mass of cases all establishing different precedent in very similar circumstances and further complicates the law. The fourth point will be unpredictable. The advantages of the certainty can be lost if there is too many of the illogical distinction, and it may also be impossible to work out which the precedent will apply to a new case. Next, it will be dependence on chance. Case law changes only in response to those that brought before, so important changes may not be made unless someone has the money and determination to push a case far enough through the appeal system. The last disadvantages I'm going to talk today is the unsystematic of progressions. Case law developed according to the facts of each case, so it does not provide the comprehensive of code. A whole series of rules can be built on one case, and if this overrule the whole structures can be collapsed as well.
So Brenda, do you agree with the Master Matthew Will which was stated in the Coral Leaf Limited case?
Yes, it is true that inferior courts needs to be bound by superior courts, but there are also exceptions that the court does not need to follow previous decisions, right?
Yes, as I mentioned before, there are certain judicial tools to help the judges to depart from the previous decision. They are distinguishing, reversing, overruling, and disapproving.
However, I noticed that disapproving is not a method of avoiding a precedent, right?
Yes, it is not a method of avoiding precedent, but it is a mechanism which facilitates a departure from precedent in a future case.
I see. So what do you think of the Doctrine of Precedent? Has the Doctrine of Precedent helped in the development of the UK's legal system?
The Doctrine of Precedent has developed the law to a certain extent, and I feel that it is good to have judicial precedent in our legal system.
I see. Yeah, I agree that too. Okay, so this will be the end of our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.